Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are plunging into a situation that really escalated quickly on the streets of Los Angeles just over the past few days.
Yeah, it's quite a story.
We're talking about tensions around immigration enforcement operations leading to something pretty dramatic, the deployment of the National Guard.
And for this deep dive, we're relying on a detailed report from CBS News. It tracks everything right up to Sunday, June 8th, 2025.
Right. So our mission here is to unpack what this source tells us. How did things unfold? Who were the key players?
And crucially, the different perspectives, because this report does include conflicting accounts.
Exactly. We want to get a clear picture, straight from the source material you shared, of, what happened and why it became such a significant moment.
And the starting point, visually at least, is that really striking image from Sunday morning.
You mean the National Guard troops arriving?
Yeah, arriving right in downtown LA. It caught a lot of attention.
Okay, so let's rewind. How does the source say we actually got to that point? It suggests the whole thing was really kicked off on Friday evening.
That's right, with ICE operations. And the report specifies these were happening across Los Angeles.
Not just one neighborhood, then?
No, definitely not. The Westlake District, downtown, South LA, it sounds like quite a coordinated effort right from the get-go.
And the source gives us a number, doesn't it, from a federal official?
It does. Someone with knowledge of the operations reported at least 118 arrests. People described as allegedly unauthorized immigrants.
Okay, 118 arrests. But the charges?
Well, that's a key detail the report highlights. As of Sunday morning, the specific charges were actually unclear.
Got it. So arrests happened, but the exact legal basis wasn't immediately public.
Right. And this seems to be where the public reaction really started to build.
How so?
The source says news spread pretty fast about 4 federal search warrants. They were served at 3 locations Friday night.
And there was something else too, right? About people being held.
Yes, critically, reports started flying around that detainees were allegedly being held inside the federal building, downtown.
Ah, okay. And that seems to be the immediate trigger for the protests.
It looks that way, yeah. Protests broke out right there.
And the source describes that scene outside the federal building on Friday night. It escalated.
It did. The report mentions some protesters throwing objects toward law enforcement.
Which then prompted an official response.
Yes, the LAPD stepped in. The report says they declared an unlawful assembly first.
And then told people to disperse.
Exactly, a dispersal order. And officers showed up in riot gear, formed a skirmish line, with shields,
Yeah.
defensive formation.
Okay, but right here, the source presents a disagreement. A conflicting account about the timing.
Yeah, this is interesting. A federal law enforcement official is quoted. They said ICE asked for LAPD help multiple times Friday night, and that it took LAPD over 2 hours to respond.
Over 2 hours. But that's disputed.
It is. The report includes a counter from a senior city official in LA.
What do they say?
They pushed back hard on that timeline. Said it took LAPD just 55 minutes.
55 minutes versus over 2 hours. That's a significant difference.
It really is. And it shows right away how the narrative becomes, contested ground, high stakes, different agencies involved.
Okay, so that was Friday night. Clearly tense. Did things calm down after that?
Not really, no. Saturday, according to the source, saw the focus shift. Geographically,
Where did the protests move?
the report indicates things centered on Paramount for a while. That's after ICE and other federal law enforcement officers were spotted there.
But wait, wasn't there another conflicting detail here about whether it was a raid?
Exactly, good point. The source includes a counter detail from Tricia McLaughlin, a DHS spokesperson.
Department of Homeland Security.
Right, and she's quoted saying there was no ICE raid in Paramount on Saturday.
So what were they doing there then?
She said agents were just staging at an office, using it as a base, essentially.
So, staging versus raid, that language difference matters, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It highlights how officials try to frame events. The choice of words can really ramp things up or try to cool them down.
Regardless of the word, the protests continued and moved again.
Yes, the source tells us things spilled over into Compton next.
And what was the scene like there? The report describes it.
It sounds like it got incredibly intense in Compton. Hundreds of demonstrators gathered.
And wasn't there a vehicle fire?
Yes. Dramatically, a car was set on fire right in an intersection, Alondra and Atlantic near Dale's Donuts. That's a vivid image from the source.
Wow. Okay, so how did law enforcement respond to that?
Well, the source reports they used crowd control measures. It mentions what looked like tear gas.
And non-lethal rounds.
Yeah, non-lethal munitions, things like rubber bullets or beanbag rounds aimed at dispersing the crowd.
During all this, Friday and Saturday, were there injuries?
Yes, the report mentions that. A federal official is cited saying multiple federal law enforcement officers were injured in these confrontations.
Okay, so officers injured. What about arrests of protesters?
Those continue too. The report notes at least 29 protesters were arrested just on Friday night alone, according to that senior city official.
But the total number for both days.
That was still unclear as of Sunday, according to the source.
So by the end of Saturday, the source paints a picture of, well, escalating operations, protests, clashes, injuries to officers, and quite a few arrests.
Exactly. A really volatile situation had developed.
And it seems like that escalating situation, especially the reports of violence and injured officers, prompted a response from the very top.
Yes. President Trump weighed in.
How did he react, according to the report?
He announced the deployment of the National Guard that came Saturday night via a post on his Truth Social platform.
And the language he used, the source quotes it.
It does. He called the events in L.A. 2 days of violence, clashes, and unrest. Pretty strong words.
And he characterized the protesters in a specific way.
Yes, he referred to them as, and this is a direct quote from the source, radical left protests by instigators and often paid troublemakers.
Wow. And he added something about them not being tolerated.
Correct, stating they will not be tolerated. Again, that's quoted in the report.
The source also mentioned something about masks.
President Trump added that masks would no longer be allowed at protests.
But did he say how that would be enforced?
The source specifically notes he didn't specify the enforcement mechanism for that.
Okay. And the deployment itself, how many troops?
The details came in a presidential memoranda issued Saturday, which the report references. It stated at least 2,000 National Guard troops.
2,000. And where were they coming from? Were they federal troops?
Mostly state troops, actually. A Defense Department official is quoted clarifying that the majority are from the California National Guard.
Interesting. So California Guard troops deployed under federal orders.
Essentially, yes. Which brings us to Sunday morning, the day that got so much coverage.
Right, the arrival. The source describes those Guard troops showing up in downtown L.A.
Yes, members were seen physically standing guard outside the Metropolitan Detention Center, the MDC, a very visible deployment.
And this move, unsurprisingly perhaps, drew immediate criticism from California officials.
Very sharp criticism, yeah. The report highlights this. Governor Gavin Newsom reacted even before they arrived on Saturday night via X.
What did he say?
He called the deployment purposefully inflammatory. That's a direct quote from his post in the source.
Inflammatory, why?
He argued the federal government wasn't taking over the California Guard because local law enforcement couldn't handle it.
But because?
But because, in his words, from the source, they want a spectacle, he actually urged people not to give them one.
A spectacle, okay. Any other officials react?
Yes. Congresswoman Maxine Water, she was there Sunday morning outside the MDC.
And her take?
The source quotes her calling the deployment a disruption, and she added, people have to stand up for what is right.
So you have this clear clash playing out at a high political level alongside the actual troops on the ground.
Absolutely. Though interestingly, the source notes that Sunday afternoon downtown was actually calm.
Really? Despite the Guard presence and the official statements?
Yeah, CBS News reporters were on the scene. They saw some protesters and activists gather, but reported no conflicts took place at that time.
Huh. Was anything else planned for Sunday?
The report mentions at least one organized protest was scheduled for later that afternoon at La Placita Olvera.
Okay. And the source mentioned something happening in Pasadena, too.
It did. A smaller, separate situation seemed to be developing there Sunday afternoon. A small gathering started after federal officers were spotted at a hotel.
Was that confirmed?
Yes, a city spokesperson confirmed the officers' presence to the source.
And the local response there?
Pasadena's mayor, Victor Gordo, issued a statement that's included in the report. He stressed no enforcement activity was confirmed in Pasadena itself.
And urged calm.
Yes, urged the community to remain calm, united, peaceful. He specifically warned against being baited or provoked into violence, while also emphasizing the right to peacefully assemble.
So, different local leaders trying to manage things in their areas. What about looking ahead? Did the source give any sense of what might happen next?
It includes an outlook from another congresswoman, Nanette Barragan.
And what did she expect?
She anticipates these ICE enforcement and removal operations continuing. Daily, in fact, for the next 30 days in LA County.
Daily for a month.
Wow.
Okay. And is local law enforcement involved in those ongoing operations?
There's a detail about that. LA County Sheriff's deputies are assisting ICE officials.
Assisting how? Are they doing immigration enforcement?
No, and the source is very careful to clarify this. It quotes a federal law enforcement official stating the assistance is strictly for perimeter protection.
Perimeter protection only.
Yes, not participation in the immigration enforcement efforts themselves. That distinction is clearly made in the report.
Okay. Wow. So if we try to pull all this together from the source, it's a picture of incredibly rapid escalation, just over 3 days.
Absolutely. It went from these specific enforcement operations.
It's widespread public protests, then moments of actual violence, injuries reported on both sides, in a sense, arrests.
Leading to a direct presidential order, the Guard deployment, and this very public clash between state and federal leaders.
Right. Culminating in troops physically on the streets of LA.
And it's a complex narrative, as presented in the report, marked by those immediate conflicts in the story itself.
Like the dispute over the LAPD response time.
Yeah, or whether Paramount was a raid or just staging.
And the totally different reasons given for the Guard deployment by President Trump versus Governor Newsom.
Exactly. Those differing accounts, the source suggests, are really as much a part of this story as the events on the ground.
So this whole sequence, look it out in the CBS News report, it really makes you wonder, based just on what's presented here, what does this deployment of the National Guard signify in this specific context?
Yeah, when you consider the federal action, the local pushback, the public protests, all these elements, the report details.
What is the report suggesting about the state of play here? Or maybe the potential ripple effects? It definitely leaves you with something to think about as this situation continues.